Call tonight's Committee of the Whole meeting to order. Recommendation of the agenda for the Committee of the Whole meeting of June 27, 2022 be adopted as circulated. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. All's in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. So starting off tonight, we'll have an opportunity for the public to comment on the 2021 annual report. So if there's any members of the public that want to come forward to speak to the annual report, please do so now. Welcome.
And I might have missed it. I quickly went through it, but I was hoping to see a section on the City of Prince Rupert's greenhouse gas reductions, our plan and how we're going towards our plan. And I wondered if it was there, and if it wasn't, could we have it in the future? Thank you.
Thanks for that feedback, actually. Any other comments? Okay, so then item B, I'm guessing this is just a recommendation for the regular, or is our communication has something to say? Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Stewart.
Thanks. So essentially, this is just a summary of the report that was presented. So the annual report is an opportunity for staff and council to highlight some of the goals of the next year and what we accomplished in the previous year. So in terms of what was accomplished in 2021, there were designs for the wetland sewage treatment completed, and in 2022 we'll be applying for a grant on that project. Construction of the CN building, many people would have noticed, has began in 2021, and it will be complete in early 2023. The Seal Cove project, in partnership with the Prince Rupert Port Authority, started in 2021 and was completed this spring. The landfill works were near complete by the end of 2021, and permitting will be finished in 2022, as well as the launch of our recycling project program. We've also achieved 90% completion of the dam in 2021, and we're anticipating to have full completion in the next month or so. Work is continuing around the RCMP station as per our mandatory requirements, and we adopted a number of housing actions in 2021 with the city placing lots on the market in 2022 as per the housing actions that council adopted. Lastly, the Eat Street project started in 2021 and was completed off in. So people that are looking for a little bit more detail, as well as the financial statements, the annual report copies are available on our website, and also paper copies are available at the front desk of City Hall.
Thank you. So recommendation that council, having heard comments from the public, recommend to the regular meeting of council of June 27, 2022, approve the 2021 annual report. Moved by Councillor Niche, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, any further questions from the public on any topic of what's ever choosing you have? Okay, entertain a motion to adjourn and reconvene the regular council meeting, or to adjourn the meeting, actually. Moved by Councillor 80, seconded by Councillor Ranhawa. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you, Ms. Stewart. Okay, I'll call our regular council meeting to order. Recommendation that the agenda for the regular council meeting of June 27, 2022 be adopted as presented with the addition of item 4J, Port Edward Harbor Authority, a letter of support request. Moved by Councillor 80, seconded by Councillor Ranhawa. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Item 3A, recommendation that the minutes of the special council meeting of June 13th, 2022 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Niche. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Item 3B, recommendation that the minutes of the regular council meeting of June 13th, 2022 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Ranhawa, seconded by Councillor 80. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, first up, we have a report from our Director of Operations and Intergovernmental Relations regarding the Major Projects Monthly Update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight we have a video update for you, and I'll play the video first and then maybe just go through some key points after. Thanks. Great, thank
Okay.
you, Mr. Mayor. So just some key outline points here for the major projects is Third Avenue Extension is about 15% complete. The geotechnical investigation is complete. The site is cleared for display for potential developers, and the road is currently on hold right now until we have a development confirmed for the site. East Street is 100% complete, as you can see. The new landfill cell, 100% complete. We're just waiting for the DOCP to be authorized by the ministry. RCMP detachment, 15% complete. The hazardous assessment has been completed. No presence of asbestos or lead paint. Demolition of the former Kingdom Hall is set to start within the next 2 weeks, hopefully. Recycling program, as you know, 100% complete and operational. The SCADA system upgrade, 8%. The RFP is released. The tower locations are confirmed, and we're just reviewing those the RFPs. Sewer treatment program, 8% complete, so 30% of design drawings are complete, and the pilot program is approved to proceed. We have FCM funding for one part of it. We have a current grant in with the province, and then tonight we'll be asking for a second grant application. And then the submarine line is about 8% complete. The RFP process is complete, and the proposals are under review. Water treatment, 10% complete. Staff is working on the RFP for release right now. Waterfront project, 15% complete. Staff has completed several milestones, and we've also engaged with a consultant for bathymetric survey and design. Woodworth Dam, 98% complete. The dam structure is basically complete. Final mechanical work is in progress. Decommissioning of the old dam is in progress, and we are just waiting for the reservoir to rebound, and we're hoping within the next month or so to be turning on the taps there. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Any questions? Councillor Cunningham.
Just one, when's the SCADA completion date for the underwater line? You say it's 8% complete. When would the other 92% be done?
So the SCADA is different than the submarine line. So SCADA is the communication system. So the communication system is under review right now with the RFPs, but we've got the tower locations established, and then we will go for another RFP to build those towers. And then the submarine line, we've got RFPs back, and they're under review with our engineering department now, as well as our project management team. We hope to award within the next couple meetings with council.
Other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
I might as well stay.
Oh yeah, you might as well stay, yeah. Okay, next is report from Director of Operations again, regarding the waste treatment grant application strategic priorities fund.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the recommendation is that Mayor and Council pass a resolution to allow staff to apply for the SPF grant for the Amanika Wetland Treatment Project. This is the pilot project. So it's to minimize the impact to local taxpayers. The SPF grant with the UBCM would cover the remaining capital costs that are left over after we would get the other grant. It is for $1.31 million. As you're aware, the wetland treatment is looking to do a pilot program for about 100 homes, and if successful, will drastically reduce the capital cost for us to have sewer treatment for this community. So we are requesting that council endorse an application to the UBCM for the SPF grant. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Cunningham. Discussion? What's the total project cost?
The total project cost is just over $6 million. We started at about $4 million, but the $2 million is really to build the road to get into where the location is.
Right. Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Go ahead.
Quick question on that treatment. It's relatively new technology, right?
Not really. It's new technology. It's new for Canada, but it's been used in Europe and elsewhere in the world for decades and decades. There are 2 compliant systems that we know of right now that are working and that are fully permitted. And there's 2 on the East Coast, and there's a small one also in OK Falls that's operating and successful with permits and is it comes out with totally compliant test results.
Councillor Ady.
I'm feeling optimistic today on the assumption that it works and it's successful. So then we have a successful system servicing a couple of streets area in Omnica Avenue area. How then, if that's $6 million or so, how then is that going to translate when we decide it's successful? So let's do it throughout the entire city. Do we have a sense of, how we're going to manage that moving forward? I realize it's off in the distance a little bit, but
No, we do. We've completed a feasibility study first before we went for a pilot program. The feasibility study was conducted using FCM grant money as well. It showed that we could do 11 of these wetland treatment areas within our community, in our green spaces. There's a document that shows where all of them are, and the discussion at that time was between $70 and $80 million to do all 11. And obviously, when we talked about classic treatment, concrete style clarifiers and all that along the waterfront, was about 200 million when you had to separate everything. So this system, you don't have to go and separate the storm from the sewer. So it would actually take the piping the way they are in the ground with combined systems.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
So next time, our plan was like whenever we do the infrastructure, we have to separate new lines, right? So now in future we don't have to, or we still do that?
No, we are still doing that. That's part of good practice to separate the storm and the sewer going through, and it really, at the end of the day, doesn't matter. It concentrated versus non-concentrated is fine. It'll just reduce the amount of input going in, but it would still treat to the same quality. The idea is to do this pilot program in our environment, and then do 1 full year of testing to ensure that it meets all of the requirements under the current wastewater regulations for the federal government. And once we've proven that and truced out that technology, then we can then look at getting more grants and moving forward. The great thing about this is that if we implement this over a phased approach throughout the community over the next 10 years, every time we phase one in, we have areas that are treated instead of a big $200 million spend that could take 10 years or 12 years to get there, and then sort of a light switch where it comes on. It becomes a ongoing, it's 10%, then 20%, then 50% of the community is treated. So we're really proud of that, and both the federal and the provincial government are really happy with the progress, and in fact asking us to help speak with them to other communities on the technology and the use of it. So.
Excellent. Follow up? Other questions?
One question that people have asked me from the Omineca area is what impact this is going to have on the neighborhood from an aesthetic or smell value or anything like that thing. So maybe you could answer that question.
Yeah, so at this point, we will be touring them a couple this year, but from what we're being told and shown is that there is no odor, and it basically looks like a grass, sort of tall grass field. There's a certain type of taller grass that goes in there. It's one way. There's no contact between what's going into the ground versus what's on the top of the ground. There's fabrics and there's different media that's there to make sure that there isn't any contact and no smell. There has to be fencing around the outside of it. Short fencing, doesn't need to be anything spectacular, but it will just look like grassed, like these grassed plots, basically, long grass plots. And from what we understand and from what's going on the East Coast, that's similar weather patterns to us, is that it just stays green all year round, and even with the snow, it sort of hibernates for a bit and then comes right back. So there isn't any issues with our weather. Actually, it actually thrives in weather like ours.
Other comments? Okay. Great. All's in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have some reports from planning, I think. First up is DVP 2217 for 3366 Avenue East.
Yes, so we have an application that came in for a development variance permit for the property located at 336 6th Avenue East. It involves a request for variance of section 5.2.6C of the zoning bylaw to have a 0.122 meter setback from a side property line in relation to the western side property line in order to accommodate a proposed front deck extension. And so the required setback from a side property line in an R2 zone is 1.2 meters. It also involves a request for a variance of the same side property line setback requirement to have a 0.732 meter setback, and this is also for a front deck extension. There's no known negative impacts to the proposed variance on the surrounding neighborhood, and the public will have the opportunity to provide feedback during the public consultation period. So the recommendation is that council proceeds with the statutory notification process for development variance permit application 2217.
Great. Anyone want to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Cunningham. Discussion?
Just a quick question. When we get these variances, and just before you present them to council, do you ever go out and check the properties?
Yeah, we do site visits.
Because I noticed on this one, the deck's just about finished being built.
That happens with some of our applications.
We had to make someone tear one down, remember? Right. Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next, DVP 2212 for 255, 257 3rd Avenue West. Any further comments on this?
No further comments.
Okay, recommendation council proceed with approval for DVP 2212. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Ranhawa. Discussion? Okay, all's in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. With the report from planning, DVP 2214 for 534 or 535 Tatlow Street.
Yes, an application was received for a development variance permit for the property located at 535 Tatlow Street. The application involves a request for a variance of section 5.2.6C of the zoning bylaw to have a 0.21844 meter setback from a side property line in relation to the southwestern side property line in order to accommodate a proposed deck overhang, and the required setback in an R2 zone is 1.2 meters. There's no negative impacts of the proposed variance on the surrounding neighborhood, and the public will have the opportunity to provide feedback during the public consultation period. The recommendation is that council proceeds with the statutory notification process for development variance permit application 2214.
Anyone move recommendation? Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Cunningham. Discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next, DVP 2215 for 224 9th Avenue East.
Yep, so an application was received for development variance permit for the property located at 224 9th Avenue East. The application involves a request for a variance of section 5.2.6C of the zoning bylaw to have a 0 meter setback from the side property line in relation to the northeastern side property line in order to accommodate a proposed enclosed walkway. The required setback is 1.2 meters. The application also involves a request for a variance of section 5.2.6C of the zoning bylaw to have a 1.0668 meter setback from a side property line in relation to the northeastern side property line to accommodate a proposed stairway and landing. And again, the required setback is 1.2 meters. The proposed variance for the setback from the side property line in relation to the proposed enclosed walkway will negatively impact the relevant adjacent property, especially considering how the house on the relevant adjacent property is a door and a window facing the proposed enclosed walkway. With the proposed enclosed walkway, the door would have less use cases due to limited space outside of the door, and the window would receive less sunlight and have less of a view. Apart from the aforementioned, there are no known negative impacts of the proposed variances on the surrounding neighborhood, and the public will have the opportunity to provide input during the public consultation period. The recommendation is that council proceeds with the statutory notification process for development variance permit application 2215.
15. Okay. Anybody want to move recommendation? Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. Discussion? Okay. All's in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. And the last one, 2216.
Yes, so an application was received for a development variance permit for the property located at 116 Hayes Cove Circle, and so this application involves a request for variance of section 5.2.6C of the zoning bylaw to have a 0.85344 meter setback from a side property line in relation to the southern side property line in order to accommodate a proposed second-story addition. And so the setback here is 1.2 meters. That's what's required. There's no known negative impacts of the proposed variance on the surrounding neighborhood. However, the public will have the opportunity to provide input during the public consultation period. The recommendation is that council proceeds with the statutory notification process for development variance permit application 2216.
Any movers? Okay, moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. Discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, item H. Ratification from the Committee of the Whole for the approval of the 2021 annual report. Are we moving and seconding this?
Yes, please.
So movers and seconders, second moved by Councillor Ady, second by Councillor Renha. Did you want any other comments? Okay. Any further discussion on the annual report? Okay, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, resolution from closed meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On Monday, June 13th, 2022, Prince Rupert City Council at their closed council meeting made the following resolution. Moved by Mayor Brain and seconded by Councillor Cunningham that council review the nominations for the 2022 Civic Recognition Awards as presented and indicated the awards to be bestowed upon the following nominees. Teresa Mackroth, Civic Merit Award, Ella Furland, Civic Merit Award, and Rob Gruber, Civic Merit Award, and that this resolution be released at a future regular council meeting.
Great, thank you. And they will be receiving their awards at Canada Day on July 1st. Next, we have a letter of support request from the Port Edward Harbour Authority. The recommendation is that council directs staff to send the letter of support as requested. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. Ms. Miller, do you want to speak to this item? What the request is?
Certainly, thank you. The Port Edward Harbour Authority is in negotiations with PRPA and DP World to find a workable solution that will provide a compromise that allows PRPA expansion to proceed, as well as the reconfiguration of Fairview Number 2 docks. The Port Edward Harbour Authority Board of Directors has set out minimum requirements for the relocation, including same or better linear feet of dock, same or better amount of services offered on the docks, accessibility such as parking, and to resolve the loading and unloading issues, which is a drive-on floating wharf. There's no doubt that the container port is an economic driver in our area. However, expansion should not come at the cost of another industry. The Port Edward Harbour Authority is looking for a letter of support that acknowledges the importance of the fishing industry to our communities and to Canada.
Okay, any discussion? Councillor Cunningham?
Well, all I'd like to say is I think when we do send this letter, it should be strongly worded that we're in support of Port Ed Harbour Authority. The southern Fairview docks are the docks for a lot of the active fishing vessels now, including the draggers, the large seiners. There's no place else in town for them to tie up, and they're running out of space in Port Ed. And the fact that the port is acting in a bit of a bully mood and just saying we're going to do this, you know, it's an administration building in a parking lot. They can put it anywhere. It's not that important that it has to be there. And I think considering the history of this town with the fishing and everything else, and this is the last bastion of fishing vessels in this town, in that area, if anything, that should be improved down there to a down ramp to drive on and off for nets, baiting, and everything else. Now some of these boats have to run all the way around to Port Ed just to load a net and things like this. And, you know, Prince Rupert, at one time the halibut capital of the world, and now slowly we're being, the fishing fleet is being decimated and also pushed out. And I really think that we should let the port know that we support this in many ways, and it's also a lot of jobs. You know, this administration parking lot, you know, it's already existing. They just want to continue on with their march, and I think we should definitely say something in a very strongly worded letter to not only the port but the Minister of Transportation. This has got to end.
Other comments? Councillor Ady?
I would just like to focus particularly on the value of the fishing industry to Prince Rupert historically as well as in the current era. And I agree that we need to do whatever we can to maintain it as a viable enterprise, or at the very least to mitigate against doing things that unfairly or arbitrarily make things more difficult for them. If you look at harbors up and down the coast and around the world, so some of them are impressively busy places, and I think there's a way to do this. And so I think a letter of this kind should certainly move forward. And I think the intention should be to get to that place where it's working for everybody.
Other comments? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next up, we have a bylaw recommendation that council give fourth and final reading to the City of Prince Rupert Elections Voting Procedure and Automated Vote Counting System Authorization Bylaw number 3496/2022. Moved by Councillor Niche, seconded by Councillor Moreau. Any further discussion on this bylaw? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next, we have the 2022 5-year financial plan amendment bylaw number 3498/2022.
Thank you. I will speak to that. So under the community charter, a municipality must adopt a 5-year financial plan annually. A financial plan may also be amended by bylaw at any time. The report provided to council outlines the items included in the attached financial plan amendment bylaw. The Digby Island ferry ramp was assessed, and it was found that some upgrades will need to be conducted this year on the Digby Island side ramp. The cost is expected to be $175,000. The proposed source of funds is capital reserves. The second item proposed in the amendment is to make the needed repairs to the failed section on McBride Street caused by the water main leak. Proposed funding for the anticipated cost of $1 million is through water surplus in the amount of $150,000 and a short-term borrowing over 5 years in the amount of $850,000. Repayment of the debt is proposed through dividends from Prince Rupert Legacy, Inc. Notice of the proposed amendment to the 5-year financial plan was posted on the City Hall notice board as well as placed on the website. The public was asked to submit comments, and as of the end of the day today, there were none received.
Thank you. So recommendation of the council give first, second, and third readings to the 2022 5-year financial plan amendment bylaw number 3498/2022. Moved by Councillor 80, second by Councillor Reinhardt. Discussion.
I will just note that I appreciate the flexibility or the responsiveness that we're able to generate through mechanisms like a reserve fund and through our own unique example of legacy. I guess I would wonder what would happen if unforeseen events brought us to a point where both of those sources of responsiveness became taxed. That's a bad choice of words. Became strained to the point where they were no longer going to be so easily drawn upon. Is there a sense that that would incur a different process from us?
Well, as far as the loan repayments, it would just be be built into water rates, and $850,000 is actually a sizable increase for water rates, so that would be difficult. We don't have much surplus left in our water fund, mainly because we have so many water breaks, and we use most of our capital funding for just emergency repairs. The capital reserve funds that you're referring to, you'll recall that in the budget this year, in the original 5-year financial plan, we did allocate $400,000 to capital reserves, and it did actually result in, made up a component of the tax increase that was passed by council. So those are the mechanisms by which council could raise the funds for any of these particular misfortunes. We are fortunate that we've been able to turn Watson Island into a bit more of a revenue generating opportunity to be able to offset many of these capital costs, whether they're planned or unplanned, as in this instance.
Other comments? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. And then from tonight's public hearing, the zoning amendment bylaw number 3493/2022. Recommendation that council give third reading of the zoning amendment bylaw number 3493/2022. Moved by Councillor Moreau, seconded by Councillor Randhawa. Councillor Moreau, do you have any comments? I see you firstly writing over there, so.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I did feel the need to respond to the one issue that was raised in the public hearing, because it is something that we've heard quite a bit in almost every upzoning application where we're talking about increasing density. And it's people that are taking issue with converting single-family dwellings into multi-family dwellings, and so I mean, I think there's two primary concerns. The idea of density, I think, was pretty well articulated, that someone doesn't want to live in a single-family home and have a duplex or triplex or fourplex next door, and then parking was the other one. But there's a couple of reasons that I remain unconvinced to vote against these bylaw changes based on those issues. The first is that the way it's written, we're not talking about an unlimited number of accessory dwelling units or an unlimited number of secondary suites per single-family dwelling. We're talking about one per dwelling. It's not a carte blanche permission for someone to go out and build in any single-family home. They need to be able to satisfy our parking requirements. It's not an ability for everyone to do anything without permits. They still have to go through the development permit and building permit process. So to me, I understand why someone would take issue with wanting to convert single-family dwellings if we were just going to say everyone can go out and build a secondary suite and accessory dwelling unit, but that's very clearly not what this bylaw is written to do. The reason that I find myself in support or unconvinced to vote against the bylaw based on that commitment is when we talk about creative ways to expand housing beyond the construction of single-family homes, to avoid the high capital cost of construction, this really does fit the bill. And Prince Rupert is already recognized as being in the top 10 in the province for having this as a creative housing solution. It's a great mortgage helper for new homeowners, flexibility for multi-generational families, for people who are caregivers. It's a more affordable rental option for singles and couples. And I think if I can for a moment speak on behalf of millennials, when you look at the cost of housing today relative to proportion of income compared to 30 or 40 years ago, it's frankly not in the cards for some people to own their own home anymore. That's a reality that we all have to face. And so we need to be thoughtful and deliberate as a city on how we're going to create the broadest possible spectrum of housing options for a well-rounded community. So for all those reasons, I'm not convinced based on that complaint to vote against this bylaw.
Other comments? Councilor Adie.
The other public comment in the public forum was an email which talked about the provisions regarding shipping containers. I do have some thoughts on that. I think in our current version of the way the regulations work, if you do some tours of some neighborhoods, you might draw the conclusion that if they're not permitted in residential areas, somebody must have missed the memo, because you see them in many places. And I think some of them have gone through the hoop of applying for a temporary use permit. Whether that's been granted or not would be unique to each circumstance. So I do think that there's something not working about what we have had in the past. I think the intention is that they not become a visible and permanent part of our residential areas. So I think we need to bear that in mind. That has to continue to be our intention. But the argument that one might need a container on a short-term basis based on, flooding, property damage, whatever, I get that. I understand that. I think that we certainly need to maintain some room for those circumstances. So as I'm looking at it as it reads, it simply says that we're going to permit shipping containers in all zones for up to 60 days, intended for temporary storage. And the problem I have with that is the same problem that I think that we've experienced with the regulations we're moving away from. And that is that they seem to pop up anyway. So I'm wondering whether there isn't some common sense way of creating a registration process with the city, maybe a permit that is posted on the side of the container that can then be followed up, and that we also include some wording about what happens at the end of the 60 days, whether there needs to be a reapplication, whether there needs to be a removal, how long does the removal have to be in place for. I think my concern is not that there aren't circumstances where I think it's reasonable to have use of a shipping container. My concern is that it's going to lead us into the same rather chaotic, unregulated circumstances that we're already in, and therefore it won't solve the problem we already have. So I think that we can clean it up a little bit if we require that a container that's going to be used for 60 days in place is registered with the city, and that there is some kind of a roadmap for what happens at the end of that time. I'm not sure if I'm moving that in some form of wording as an amendment or not. I think that's probably the way to go procedurally, is it not?
If you want to make an amendment to the resolution, for sure.
Okay, so shall I try some wording and we'll see what happens? I don't think I've ever done this before. That shipping containers are permitted up to 60 days for temporary storage in all zones. That and this would be a second statement, that containers in residential zones be required to be registered with the city, and the city will provide indication of that registration, and that the owners be responsible for removing at the end of the 60-day period. Anybody wants to help me out, they can.
Any seconders? Second by Councillor Cunningham. Okay, so the amendment's now on the floor. Discussing the amendment specifically. Comments? Councillor Niche.
You know, I think where the biggest problem, what I see here, is that the inefficient process of applying for a temporary use permit is causing the want for the change. And what I see is that there should be, more to your point, if someone wants to put one on there temporarily for 60 days, usually what it is, it's like insurance claims. You know, the house is flooded. They need to get the stuff out fast. They don't have time to go through a process. They need to get the stuff out fast. So to me, an easy way of taking care of that is if someone wants to use this 60-day clause for a container, is basically it needs to be registered, you know, at City Hall at the earliest convenience of opening day or whatever it be. So if a flood happens on a Friday night, they bring a container in Saturday, they're clearing the house out. Monday morning they come in and apply for their 60-day use. And to me, that would be an easy way to kind of solve all the problems, because we seem to have this where people are concerned where, you know, the 60 days isn't going to start until someone complains about it. So this way we're still putting a requirement for somebody to register it for that 60-day use, but they would have until the next opening day to get it done, because then it still allows them to do that. Because I kind of see that that's what the problem is they, you know, these containers are being put in to clear out a house quick because of insurance claims, and they don't have time to come in and apply for a temporary use permit, go through the process. You know, this is something they need now, and so I think that's an easy way of solving the problem. Is just registered on next business day, and I think that could take care of it.
Does, just before we go to Councillor Cunningham, does that resolution answer that issue in your mind?
I would think so. Yeah, like I think if it's registered, because I think the complaint was that, you know, from Mr. Casey there is that, you know, someone puts you know, they don't do anything, and after 60 days, if it's not gone, well, now, you know, who's tracking the 60 days? And I think that's where where the problem is that nobody's tracking the 60 days until somebody complains about it. Whereas this way, you're still having to kind of register it, but you're having the flexibility of that they can throw that container in there on a Saturday afternoon, and it gets registered on Monday morning, and it goes on. So that they still are required to register it. It's just it gives them the flexibility to put it on a site instantly.
Right.
I agree with exactly what Councillor Adie's saying, that it's, basically Councillor Neese is saying the same thing. He's just talking about a Saturday. Usually if your basement floods on Friday night or Saturday, you're not going to get anyone there until Monday anyway, but a day or two irrelevant, that's irrelevant. But we have to have some way of tracking these. And, to just say, okay, you can put it on there and 60 days later, you got to take it off. It's not working now, it's not going to work later. So if we have some sort of permit process, so be it. If it's, I don't know what it's going to cost staff to do this, but so be it if it's $20 and for 60 days with an option of either possibly extending it, but that's up to whatever. If there is an insurance claim and it's not done in 60 days, they might need it for another 60 days. They come back in and talk to staff and renew it or whatever. But there has to be a start and an end date, and we have to be able to track that for bylaw. Otherwise, bylaws running around chasing their butt, looking for containers, and was that there yesterday or was it not, and things like this. So this simplifies the process, exactly what Councillor Adie's talking about, and I think that's an amendment that should be put onto it.
Councillor Morrow, then Councillor Randhawa.
I don't necessarily object in principle, but I'd like to explain why I'm not comfortable voting in favor of that amendment tonight. Because even asking this question of staff, I feel it puts them on the spot in making an amendment of this nature. Because if I was to ask the question, is that too administratively burdensome or time consuming, or where are we going to get the staffing capacity? What is going to be the impact on city staff who ultimately have to administer this new program as we're talking about it? I'd really like to get a better understanding on that front before I would vote in favor or against. So I'm not prepared to vote in favor tonight without that information.
Councillor Randhawa, then Councillor Adie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I like to keep track. I'm in favor of that amendment, but on the same time, we have to hear from staff too, right? What's their plan? How they can administrator, they need extra people or how they can do. So I think we need report from there. So I don't know if we can do today or we can wait for next meeting.
I understand the concern. If I understand the procedures correctly, then, even though this is a motion that an amendment that I've proposed, would the procedure then be to vote the amendment down, but then make the choice to not support this particular item in the list of items until such time as staff came back with it?
We could do it that way. The other option, we could vote to table or no, I guess we can't table an amendment if we're adopting the bylaw, can we?
Well, we could have tabled the third reading completely.
You could.
It's stupid.
You could
Table
table
third
it.
reading, yeah.
Table third reading. Yeah, you wouldn't be able to table it and then pass third reading, especially if you wanted changes. So, based on the feedback, I would suggest that tabling it and have staff report back with potential changes and feedback on a process might be prudent.
Well, so, but before anyone moves that, if I could.
We're not making any decisions.
No, if
yet,
I
it's
could.
discussion.
So a motion to table does not allow for debate, just so everyone's aware of that.
Yes.
So if anyone moves to table, then we can't actually discuss tabling it. So before we do that, I just want to throw my 2 cents on that. I would think it would be better procedural-wise if we would go forward with the zoning bylaws has been written, and as we've discussed, as we've passed third reading, and then ask for a report back from staff on making that amendment in the future. And then that way we can get all the good stuff done. The administrative updates, the definition changes, accessory dwelling units, secondary suites, all of that good stuff gets taken care of tonight. And then we can get that report back on staff specific to shipping containers and can make that amendment in the future.
However, we still have to do 4 readings to make that amendment, correct? We have to bring the whole bylaw back, right? Yeah. So
Hey,
that's a whole nother. Anyways, go ahead. Your mic.
I hate to challenge Mr. Procedure, but it's a pretty simple bloody procedure. Somebody wants a permit, they walk in, $20, get a permit and walk out. It's just like getting a dog permit, which most people don't get anyway, but this is just simple. The impact on staff is going to be minimal because they just walk into the outside office, say, I'd like to get a permit for 60 days for a container, stamp, here's your paper, sign this, and they walk out. As far as administering it, it's bylaw that's got to administer the bylaw enforcement's got to administer it, and it's going to make their job a lot simpler because they know which is registered, and if they're driving down the street, they check on their computer, it's not registered, it's illegal. It's that simple. I don't know why we're complicating it with this discussion.
Well,
But,
I don't think that's.
But there's other parts of this bylaw other than the container one that I have some points to make either. So if we can continue this, but I think it's a fair amendment to make, and I don't think it's going to burden the staff with a lot of extra work. And
So
I know every piece of paper costs money to process, so if you have a $20 or $25 permit fee to do this, then fine. If you want to burn something in your backyard, you get a burning permit. You phone up, you go down, you pay your fee, and you get the permit. It's a done deal. It's a pretty simple process. I don't see where it's going to burden the staff. But
This is where I'm happy to respond to that. So this is why I said I don't want to say that I'm not in favor or I'm not pro or con to the proposal in principle. That's what I'm saying. But I don't want to take your word on the fact. Sorry, that's not what I'm trying to say. I'd like to hear staff's opinion on the administrative burden, rather than us arbitrarily set a fee and a process here tonight that we haven't discussed. This is the first time we're discussing it. I'd really like to have a report back on staff on what the impact of them will be, what the recommended fee would be, what the recommended process looks like, what the recommended enforcement would look like. That's all I'm getting at. For me, it's a process-related question, not a product. So I'm not opposed to what you're. I'm not opposed in principle, just basically on process.
Councillor Niche.
Can we turn down this change, go to the readings of the whole zoning, but while we do third reading, could we not just take out
Yes,
the
we can.
the bylaw for the containers part of it,
That's right.
and say take that out for now, pass all the rest of it, and then we can just we'll refer that to staff. They can come back with another report. We can do the container portion of that later on, and then we solve all the problems here. The staff can take care of that, and we can pass all the rest of the bylaw. And to me, that seems pretty easy.
That is the option. We can do that. And I'll just quickly add to what Councillor Moreau is saying, and this is where I'll agree with Councillor Cunningham and Councillor Moreau. Is it's simple, but you're just putting a number out there, Councillor Cunningham. You're just saying $20.
Well, yeah.
And you're saying it's going to be, but the thing is, we just don't have the details of what exactly that is. I mean, you don't just say, okay, we're just going to trust they're going to figure it out. That's basically what we're saying. We don't have any details of that. I think all Councillor Moreau is saying is let's just put the program in place. What is the program? Let's vote on what we all agree to what the program is going to be, rather than what we might believe it might look like, which I completely agree is a very simple process. I don't personally believe either this is an additional staff capacity issue. I mean, how many people are rushing to City Hall to apply for a grant or a permit just to get a container? This is the same thing you would do with any other thing. I don't see it as any additional burden either. However, let's figure out the cost, what the repercussions are if they don't, what those things are. That can easily come back to us probably by the next meeting, I would say. And I'm in principle in favor of the suggestion. I think it's exactly what needs to happen. So I think I can sense agreement all along the board here on all of this, and I think Councillor Moreau is feeling the same way. But he is correct, I think, in the process-wise. We should get something back from them and saying, here is exactly the program that we're all voting on, that we all can then see the details of, and I think that's probably a more prudent method. So process-wise, we could do a friendly amendment to withdraw the amended item and go back to the third reading, and we can then make an amendment to withdraw or change the amendment to be withdrawing the just the container portion based on a staff report of a program for containers, based on the feedback that we've just given them tonight. So if the mover and, I'm not sure who seconded it, Councilor Cunningham, second, or are in agreement for a friendly amendment, that amendment can change to a report coming back from from staff on container program based on our discussion tonight, and that will be pulled out of the third reading here to be reintroduced once that's prepared. So that would be the amendment if the mover and seconder are okay with that being changed that way. Are we in agreement with that?
I'm going to restate it so that I'm sure that I get it.
Okay.
I think what we're doing is we're withdrawing my original suggestion, but that we are taking the item on the containers out of the bylaw that we're considering, pending a report back from staff at a future meeting on that item.
Yeah, based on the suggestions in which
Based on these
we've
suggestions.
outlined this evening. What now?
So my only question is, if we remove, well, we just haven't encountered this one yet. If we remove something from the bylaw at this stage, after the public hearing, do we have to go back to public hearing, given that the bylaw has changed? Even though it's a removal, it's not any new restrictions. So
Technically, any changes made after the public hearing will require a further public hearing. Even though the only change is removing a piece of the bylaw, it is a change to the bylaw that the public hearing was for, and as such, you would need to do another public hearing.
So
I already know where he's going. He's probably right on this one, actually.
So to restate, I just want to get this straight. To restate what I think my original suggestion, I think it was to pass the bylaw as it was written, but refer the containers back to staff. That brings the bylaw that we've given 3 readings to and done public hearing on. It brings that into force, and then we can make a further amendment to the container specific portion once that's adopted and we have the report back from staff.
Yeah, and I think we can do that at 4th reading, actually, if there is a change, right? Because we're taking the feedback based off the public hearing and making a change, and we're only at 3rd reading.
I think it's
I believe the process is that you need to repeal the 3rd reading afterwards. So if you were to give it 3rd reading now, then we would come back and you'd have to repeal 3rd reading, and then there would be amendment there, and then it could go ahead and go to 4th.
Well, I think maybe then the best option is to table then, because then we don't have to do another public hearing. It would just be one more meeting, right? No, if we table, we're not changing anything. We're waiting for a report back, and then we can make changes at that point. But we're not making any. If we don't make any decisions tonight, we're still right.
At the end of the day, you're not going to get this all adopted when you're thinking that you can get it adopted. So it's probably just better to just refer it back to staff. So don't pass this one, just refer it back to staff to go ahead and bring forward something else. We can have, we'll look into whether we have to have another public hearing, which I imagine we probably will, but then we could have 3rd reading on the next council meeting as well. And just for everyone's information, any new additional fees would need to go through fees and charges amendment. So there would have to be another bylaw that would be included. We can't just arbitrarily start charging fees without having council adopt it.
That was kind of what was the point that I wanted to make for him, is that we can't just say the amendment and say it's just that easy. Unfortunately, right? No, that's what I mean, right? You're right about that. Okay, so
Before we go any farther, there's other points in the...
Oh, I know, we're not making any decisions yet. I'm just trying to, for this item of the containers, we got other things to talk about in the bylaw. We'll table the amendment for now, if mover and seconder are good with that, because we're going to come back to a decision ultimately. Okay, so all in favor of the tabling the amendment? Okay, so we're back to the main bylaw now. Just on that note, then obviously there's going to have to be some changes with that. However, from my understanding is that we're allowed to make changes after the public hearing based on the feedback, and we don't have to go back to public hearing on that, right? So that's from what I understand. That's the reason why you do a public hearing and then you do third reading. So if we make changes to it, theoretically we're allowed to do that without having to go ahead and change the whole. That's the whole point of that. So I just want to make sure we got some clarity on that, and I don't know if we're going to have that tonight or not. But let's park that for a moment. Let's go to the other items. Councillor Cunningham, you have some other items, and I think Councillor Niche as well, about the general bylaw.
Okay, like Section 9, off-street parking. The proposed amendment, off-street parking means the use providing for parking or storage of vehicles. And in our property maintenance bylaw, I just want to know if this contradicts the property maintenance bylaw. It's 3297, 2010. It says in it that, whereas B, unsightly means but is not limited to an accumulation of motorized vessels, vehicles, or trailer parts, or all or part of any motor vehicle which is not registered and licensed in accordance with the Motor Vehicle Act or capable of movement under its own power, including any dismantled, wrecked, or non-operational vehicle for more than 1 month in any 12-month period, or any vehicle which is not licensed for a period of 1 year, which is not covered with a fitted vehicle cover or housed in a garage or a carport. Now, if we're telling people they can put stuff on their lots, does that not contradict the original property maintenance bylaw? And it's something that I think we should take a look at before we do that. Just, continuing on in the discussion about this thing. And, that's one. The second one is the marina parking. We're talking about marina use, 1 space for 2 mooring spaces and 1 space for 2 rental boats. So if you've got 4 vessels there, you're talking 2 parking places. Now if you've got rental boats, people renting a boat or going out on a charter are each going to have a vehicle. There's 2 vehicles. Now we've already got problems with people going down to their boats and parking at Rustbrook and not having enough parking. I just find that amount of parking somewhat inadequate. They say the ratio is parking is adapted from the City of North Vancouver's zoning bylaw. Well, the City of North Vancouver, where I'm from originally, has a lot of private parking and public parking lots around the marinas, as well as the marinas have their own parking. If you go down to Mosquito Marine and places like that, there's public parking all around there. So people can park their vehicles by the hour of the day and go out in a boat and come back, not necessarily park it in the actual marina parking lot. So it's something where we've got a crunch down on the waterfront already with water users parking and that, and I think it could possibly add to that problem again. So these are just things that, as I was reading through it, I thought I'd look at and think, hey, these might be things that we might have to tweak or take a second look at. Now that we're sending this back and looking at it, it's things that can be looked at by staff.
Okay.
There's others, but they're minor compared to these.
Councillor Niche?
Just wanted to talk about the secondary suites and all that portion of the zoning bylaw. And I'm in support of adding the additional housing. We need the additional housing. We've all talked about this. It's a well-known thing. And the parking is required to have 1 extra spot. Now, is it enough? I think that every neighborhood is going to have its circumstances where it's not going to work. But generally, probably most communities have the same bylaw as us, and that's 1 parking spot per unit. So, we have parking problems everywhere in this town, but I don't think that by doing this bylaw, we're going to have this massive influx of people building, secondary units in their houses. I do feel that there will be some people that will do it, but I don't think it's going to be a massive program, but it is going to help. It's going to help housing, and I think we need to stick with one per, because I had this conversation with a friend of mine actually the other day, and he's lives in a neighborhood where some new housing has been built recently, and he's saying, well, there's only one parking spot per duplex, and now the street's being filled up, and he had a problem with it, but he was actually part of the problem also by having more driveway space than what's actually required or allowed. So I think we can't. I said to him, well, what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to say 1.5 parking spots per unit? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So I think for the amount that it's going to impact and the amount that actually people are going to build, I think, we're sticking with the traditional one spot per unit is what we have to do. There is obviously places where people will have more than one car, and I guess if they choose to live in a neighborhood where they have to struggle to find parking, then that's their choice to move there.
What's the change that you feel needs to be made then?
Well, I don't think there needs to be a change. I think that I support the way it is. It's just that, the discussion has been parking, where there's complaints about parking, and we're on an island. There's only so much land available. I mean, there is no solution to it other than hoping that people will create extra parking if they can. But you can't add more than one parking spot. You can't go 1.5, you got to go 2. So if you go 2, now all of a sudden someone has a duplex, and now you have to have 4 parking spots. So with the small lots in our town, we have small lots, we have, we're on an island. I don't think that we can increase it. So I really think we have to support it the way it's written, even though, yes, there will be problems in some neighborhoods, but I don't feel that, I don't feel there's a way to fix that. And we need extra housing, so I think I support it the way it is, because I don't see a way of, we can't solve it. You can't make more land on an island. So,
Councillor Canham.
When it comes to parking, I tend to agree, but right now the reality is most families have 2 cars. Now, if we're going to pass this, and we're talking a duplex becoming a 4-plex, so they need 4 off-road parking spots. Is that correct? Now, if they don't have it, what do? You only have a 3-plex, or you stay a duplex? This is where, when they come for a building permit, or a variance, or something like that, we'll have some control in the parking. I know when Mr. Saka was talking earlier, I'm familiar with that crescent up there, and it's a tight crescent to begin with. One of his neighbors has a boat. They have 2 or 3 cars, and then the other neighbors, some of them have bigger driveways and things like this, so they're okay. But, one of the neighbors has his driveway taken up partially with a container, So, it goes to control of what's going on in a neighborhood. If you have a boat, that's a vehicle on a trailer, sort of thing, a vessel on a trailer, that's taken up 1 parking place. Now, if you have two vehicles as well as that boat and trailer, now you're talking about 3. If you put a suite in that place, then you got a problem. So I think when the permitting comes up, it's going to put a little more burden on some of the building inspectors and permitting department, but it's something we're going to have to look at and say, okay, well, we can't permit you to have a suite, or we can't allow that duplex to have a 4-plex when you don't have enough off-road parking to begin with. And we're seeing that. And the one mention of the duplex that was going to be rezoned for a 4-plex, it's already a 5-plex. Parking's a problem in that area already. But these are things I think we're going to have to take baby steps with and take control of, because it doesn't matter where you go in this city. Like Councillor Neese says, parking's a problem. On our street, it's a problem. It's just there. It's going to exist. The more people become affluent with better paying jobs, the more they buy another vehicle for their wife or their kid. And it's our society. We live in a society of vehicles. We got to deal with it. But I think we as the city can control that problem to a degree. I don't think we'll totally control it, totally solve it like Councillor Nace says, but, you know, I think we can take a good look and say yes, A or nay to certain developments or not.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Nish said, I support this bylaw. Housing is a big problem right now. People want to move, but no housing available. So this bylaw will encourage people to do second suite. And I know parking is a problem, but I think one parking lot should be okay for now. But the main is housing problem we can solve with this bylaw, except the the container time tracking and fees. We can talk that next time. But overall, I will support this bylaw.
More comments? Well, no. My thought here is, no matter what, if we table it, we're going to be waiting. If we do amendments, we're going to have to do another public hearing.
So I just did a quick ask Dr.
Yeah,
Google.
I would like to.
Yes. So in accordance with the Local Government Act, after a public hearing, you can either adopt or defeat the bylaw, or you can alter and then adopt the bylaw so long as the alterations do not affect use or density. So by the removal of sections, you're not altering the use, because the use is already stated in the existing bylaw.
Perfect.
So you could remove the sections that you wish further clarification on, pass the sections that you're okay with. So if you wanted to pass with the removal of section 5, which is the shipping containers, we could do that. You could do that. Come back at the next meeting and do fourth and final, and then we would bring to council a report with respect to shipping containers and do a further zoning amendment bylaw for that.
Perfect. Then I think that would be the recommended course of action for this evening, eh? Okay. So, so moved by Councillor Nish to remove section 5, and seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Okay, so that's for just the amendment. All in favor?
What about section 9, where I thought there might be a contradiction between our proposed amendment?
Well, we'll do this section first for a second. So we'll just do section 5. So all in favor for section 5 for the container? Okay. So that's now amended for the main resolution. Are you proposing a resolution?
Well, I want staff to check that out and see if it is a contradiction or not.
I think we could probably move forward with third reading, and if there is one, then you can come back to fourth reading. Is that correct? Doesn't affect anything, right?
Any further changes, you would have to repeal third and redo it, and then redo fourth.
Right.
So it would take an additional meeting. You can't do third and fourth in the same.
Okay. And what's the resolution that you're looking for exactly?
Well, the resolution is just if it's a contradiction with the property maintenance bylaw and the proposal we're making that people can store their vehicles or store stuff on their lots. Because the property maintenance bylaw says private or public property within the city of Prince Rupert, and the amendment we're making is about storing vehicles on their property, and if they're not licensed for 1 year, then they're in contradiction with the property maintenance bylaw. So that's why I just wanted to point that out. You know, like where if we try to enforce the property maintenance bylaw and the other bylaws amendment says they can store it there, then where are we with it? That's my only concern. Down the street, down
Did
the road.
staff have any information at all about that?
Yeah, I can speak to that quickly. So just to clarify the proposed amendment to off-street parking, there is already an existing definition of off-street parking in the bylaw. The existing definition is that off-street parking means use providing for temporary parking or storage of vehicles. Off-street parking is simply just a parking lot that's not on street. So it's like a driveway, for example. It's the proposed amendment is just removing the word temporary parking. There's nothing within the proposed amendment that would suggest that the storage of vehicles would be unlicensed or qualify for anything that is
Okay.
in the property maintenance
Thank you for
bylaw.
clarifying that. So it wouldn't contradict that then. No, that's good. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we're clear on what exactly that problem was. So thank you for clarifying that. Okay, is there other discussions? We know there's a container challenge, and I agree with that change that needs to happen with that. Other than that, with the rest of the bylaw, other than the clarity there from the discussion this evening? Other than we need to brush up on the Local Government Act, clearly.
Sorry, so to be very, very, very clear, you're looking to pass the existing amendment with the removal of the section 3.19 of the bylaw that references shipping
Oh, I
containers.
thought you said it was section 5.
It's section 5 of MIV's report,
Oh,
but
yeah,
section
right.
3.19 of the bylaw.
Yes, that's correct. Absolutely clear now. As clear as mud. Any further discussion? Okay. Okay, all in favor as amended? Okay, motion's carried, third reading. Thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing how the container program could look.
Mr. Mayor, while Rose is,
Oh,
Ms.
yes,
Miller's dealing
5C.
with that. Yes,
I missed
thank
5C,
you.
sorry. So we're going to go back one. The Police Detachment Loan Authorization Bylaw number 3484, 2022. Recommendation that Council give fourth and final reading to the Police Detachment Loan Authorization Bylaw number 3484, 2022. Moved by Councillor Ranhawa, second by Councillor 80. Any further discussion?
Just because we just finished the alternate approval process, Ms. Miller is going to speak to that.
Okay.
Thank you. I will confirm that as of 4 p.m. today, in accordance with the 4:30 today, sorry, in accordance with the process and policy, we have received 0 comments in the negative with respect to the proposed bylaw.
Oh, none at all. Okay. Okay, any further discussion? All's in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, any reports, questions, or inquiries from members of council? Councillor Ranhawa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We just talk about the makeup right. So every time people see us right, they ask the timeline for the fix the problem there. Anything? I know it's a big job, but you have anything update?
Thank you, Councillor. So at this point right now, we're still assessing, I would say. So we've got everything exposed. I would suggest it would be probably about 3 weeks before we would be back together. But the road will probably still remain closed with maybe some light traffic on it due to paving. So the project likely will, with the piping, will be back in about 3 weeks, maybe a month, and but then it would likely remain closed until paving is complete, just because it is a ministry highway on a hill. Thanks.
One more, like another one is like, you have any schedule for paving this year? Like when people are, that's another ask people ask.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I gave a memo to Council earlier this week. We've awarded the paving program to Adventure Paving, and with that award, they said that they would start within a month. Thank you.
Councillor Cunningham.
Now with the beautiful weather here, I notice we've got some line painting done, but I noticed a lack of it the last couple of days. I just wondered if they're going to continue, because putting chalk dust on the road so it can disappear. Because there was a real concern with the lack of lines in the city the last 6 months.
Thank you, Councillor. As we've talked about in the past, there's really only one localized contractor that does this work, and so they're doing a bunch of communities. So they come in, do a little bit in every community. We're hoping to have them back within the next couple of weeks. They are not here right now. They've went and done another community, but they will be back.
And another question, I've been getting a couple of, or more than a couple of questions from the public about is when and where are we going to start with the new Public Works yard and that, and the old GM dealer? And Corinne had answered the question to me, but maybe she could make a public statement about it.
Thank you, Councillor. So we have just approved the drawing set just as of last week, and we will be going out to tender for a compliant RFP to do the work. The work is a combination of some structural work, but just fitting it out for public works. So we're not sure the timeline on that or the cost yet. We're hoping that we can get some contractors as soon as possible to get that going and make that our new home. Thanks.
Well, I feel particularly responsible for the phrase "can of worms" based on our container discussion. And I promise this was written down as a question before Councillor Cunningham brought up the derelict vehicles. But I was speaking with somebody today who was wondering, who was concerned about the number of derelict vehicles in driveways. And I remembered that we had a program, I think probably just before COVID, where we were providing an incentive of some kind to help remove some of those vehicles. So my question is, that program I imagine has expired. Is there any thought about bringing that back to keep working at that problem of derelict vehicles in people's driveways?
We can certainly add that to the work plan for next year.
Anything else? Okay, entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor 80, second by Councillor Reinhala. All those in favor? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.